Welcome to By the Blade, the weekly podcast where we talk about the blade and blade arts, interview makers of the blade and teachers of the blade, and anything else we can think of. I'll be your host, Rich Fern. My guest this week is a lifelong martial artist, opening his first school in 1978. His formal schooling is in technical and scientific illustration and product design, which saw him studying the human anatomy in great detail. He is an actor, stuntman, fight choreographer, a trainer to the stars such as Steven Seagal, Dolph Lundgren, Benicio del Toro, and many more. More importantly, he works with combat vets and victims of sexual assault and violent crimes. Please join me in welcoming Guro Mark Mikita. Yeah, so if you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right, we'll just get to it. How are you today, Mark? Because I kind of already did an introduction when I was waiting earlier. I was like, well, I'll just do my introduction. But,
okay.
And we'll just get started here. Hey, I was researching you, and I was watching your video with Burton Richardson on Kambalaya, I believe is what it's called.
Kamalayan.
Kamalayan, excuse me. Yeah. Yes. And I just want to let you know that I, too, say druthers all the time.
That's one of those weird words, isn't it?
It is. But most people don't get it except for the older crew, right?
Yes.
So I know your father was in World War II. That's right on your website. My stepfather was in World War II. He was 26 years my mother's senior. And so I get a lot of my lexicon from him, you know.
It's a different vocabulary from that era, that's for sure.
Oh, completely. So a lot of people look at me like, what are you talking about? You know, I've moved all over the country, and I know the podcast isn't about me, but real quick, you know, I've moved all over the country, and I go from Rhode Island to Connecticut, and nobody knows what a bubbler is. What's a bubbler? It's what you drink out of. So, awesome. Well, you know, your website doesn't really give a complete history in the arts that you've done. It talks about Kali, and maybe a few other things. And I guess if you can just give my listeners a quick rundown of, you know, how you started in the martial arts, what you studied before you settled on Kali.
Well, I started when I was just a kid, and back then when I was a kid, there was basically no such thing as I'll call it a storefront martial arts school. You didn't drive down the street and see a strip mall with a karate or a judo. That was unheard of. In fact, most of the time, probably it was veterans who were teaching, and they were either teaching in their basement or their garage, church rec room, things like that. I remember one class that I particularly liked, actually, when I was in my teens, and the dues were $2 a month. So, it was just it was a very different era. And so I started in Korean martial arts, which was semi-available. Again, there was not a lot of martial arts around. And as soon as I became, how can I put it? As soon as it became clear to my parents that I was pretty serious about this stuff, because I was constantly practicing, never missing class, et cetera, my dad started to tell me that while he didn't know what it was called, that we needed to find Filipino martial arts. And he had fought in the Philippines in World War II, landed on the beach in Leyte on October 20th, 1944, and he and his fellow 200,000 or so soldiers were led into the jungle by guerrillas who were almost assuredly all escrimadores. And over the next approximately a year, he witnessed a lot of encounters, let's call them, between sword-wielding fanatical Japanese soldiers and bolo-wielding Filipino guerrillas. Not a one of those encounters was lost by the Filipinos. So my dad was a young man, and he was completely blown away by the lethality and the fighting spirit of the Filipinos. And so when I became interested in martial arts, he said, I don't know what the hell it's called, but let's go find that. So it took quite a long time. Again, if the typical martial arts weren't available, Filipino martial arts weren't available at all. It was really hard to find. So But he did help me find a first teacher, and I've had several teachers since then. Probably the most famous everybody always talks about is Inosanto, but I've had a lot of other teachers as well. Teachers whom I actually consider to be much more of escrimadores than Inosanto is, because that was their art from their childhood, and they either were guerrillas themselves or trained directly with guerrillas who had actually used the weapons in combat. So it was much kind of closer to the edge kind of thing than a modern day guy teaching in a storefront martial arts school. So,
how hard was it to find an instructor in these arts at that time? I know
well,
you said it'd take you a while.
Again, it wasn't, I apologize for interrupting you. It wasn't finding a school. It was finding a teacher. And some of my first teachers, one guy was a gunnery sergeant in an army base, and Filipino gunnery sergeant, and his uncle had taught him a typical Filipino martial arts story. So, and the art was sort of within their family, and it's a tribal martial art, so that's a normal thing.
Right.
The typical thing with Filipinos is what we call backyard training. So usually one-on-one or three of us with a teacher, things like that, small groups. Aside from in recent, maybe since the mid to late 80s and through to now, very few of those teachers had, air quotes, martial arts school. They were just teaching in their backyard. Most of them were retired stevedores, retired merchant marines, farm workers, things like that. Interesting, because the Manongs, the older Filipino guys, the grandfathers, if you want to call them that, oftentimes they have the silliest sense of humor. They're completely nondescript, and they kill everybody in the room. So I learned after a while, especially into my 20s and 30s, I learned to kind of look for those old guys and look at their hands, see if they've got the calluses. Oftentimes, if you ask them directly amongst people, they would deny knowing anything about Filipino martial arts. It's kind of a thing back then, especially, I think, post-World War II. A lot of Filipino moms saw the Filipino martial arts as something that only thugs did, and was more in the back alleys and the dark rooms of the Philippine barrios and so forth. So for a couple of generations, actually, I think the Filipinos kind of went into that dark place after the war. And so nowadays, if I get a Filipino student, especially a woman, first thing I'll say is, well, go and ask your parents if it's okay with them. And if they're okay with it, I'd be happy to teach you, because sometimes they're adamant, and oftentimes they'll come. The parents will actually come. I don't teach kids, but even with adults, the parents will come, and when they see me teach, and when they see what I teach, and they see the reverence and respect that my school demonstrates for the Filipino culture and history, they're actually thrilled, because it is part of their heritage, part of their cultural traditions, and it's great to, from my perspective, after what my dad went through and the trauma that he went through in the war, it's great from my perspective as his son to be able to give back to the very culture that he risked his life to liberate from the Japanese. So it's a great positive thing for me.
Wow. So I read that you basically grew up on military bases. Did you ever end up in the Philippines through that?
Nope. No. I've traveled there, but I've never gone there as a student.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not against doing that. In the times, the era that I was exclusively a student, and I was never exclusively a student as an adult. I've always been teaching, but I was studying a lot more. It's hard to find teachers now. I was. How can I put this? I was. When you're a certain age, you're basically unaware of the richness that your particular time kind of provides for you.
Yes.
So it never occurred to me that these old guys, a lot of them were World War II guerrillas who had actually used their weapons against an enemy. It never occurred to me that was a kind of unique and unusual. Yeah. So now, if I was a 15 or 16-year-old Philippine interested martial artists want to go and study Filipino martial arts, it would essentially be impossible to find anybody who'd ever actually done it directly themselves. You'd probably find somebody who was studying with someone who was 2 or 3 generations away from an actual warrior who fought in combat. So,
right.
Again, at the time, as much as I was a psycho fanatical student, thankfully, it never occurred to me that that was an unusual thing that I had access to those guys. So I'm delighted now to be an ambassador of that realness that they brought to it that is basically absent from the modern generation.
Right. Do the Filipinos always, I don't know if the ones in the Philippines are here, do they celebrate the martial art, or is it really just localized pockets, if that makes sense?
No, it doesn't make sense. Make it
make it make sense, Rich.
Make it more clear. It's a little. I'm like, what the heck is he asking?
Well, excuse me. Yeah. So you were saying that after World War II, there was a time when the moms were like, "No, you guys are all thugs." Was the martial art ever celebrated in the Philippines, like in, say, Japan or China, where everyone's proud to have a school?
Sort of. It's certainly much more celebrated now. A couple of years ago, the national sport went from cockfighting to arnis.
Okay,
so it's now a national sport. Although what you're seeing when you see like weak half competitions and stuff like that, that's what I would refer to as entablado, which is a sort of for show. It's not the edgy, lethal stuff that would be used in real combat.
Is it kind of like a watering down of regular fencing versus?
Not exactly. It's, if you think of what the word means, entablado means on the table. So it's what I'm willing to show you. Or another way to look at it would be on stage, like what I'm willing to demonstrate for you. Because remember, you're talking about a tribal culture. So if you live on this island and another guy lives on another island, if you show him what you do, well, you now show that to your buddies and you go over and you take all of their possessions. And so the knowledge was actually their life in combat. So it was something that was kept very close to the vest. They wouldn't share it. Right. So if they were sharing it, they would share the, for lack of a better way of putting it, the pretty stuff, the cool looking stuff, the twirling, the spinning, the impressive stuff. But the lethal, go directly to checkmate stuff, it's not really beautiful to watch. I can make it cinematic if I'm teaching an actor, if I'm in front of the camera myself. But if I'm doing it for real, it's close, it's very tight, it's sudden, and you probably wouldn't even see it. And that kind of stuff is generally not taught to the public. Oftentimes, I've met a lot of people who've had 30 or 40 years in the Filipino martial arts, and they never even heard of that stuff. Most schools in the United States, certainly, and from my experience of working with people from the Philippines, most schools in the Philippines are also focused almost exclusively on entablado. That's not a negative thing. Entablado, think of it as the basics that you would teach somebody who was first introduced to a martial art.
Okay.
Angles, footwork, movement, things like that. That's all fine. Right. There is nothing per se negative about entablado skills. They just, as one of my teachers say, they lack the teeth. The teeth of the art are held back, and especially in the old guys in the backyards, they would not teach you until they knew your character.
Okay.
They would teach you entablado skills, and they could teach you that for decades, and you could become quite impressive at them, but you would not be a threat to somebody who knew the more lethal stuff.
Interesting.
That's why the old guys will oftentimes laugh at people who are spinning and twirling their sticks.
Yeah.
Because they know, oh, well, you'll hear them amongst themselves or to their more senior students, they say, those people are blind. They don't understand. Huh. And again, the whole point here is not to have kind of an elitist kind of quality. It makes complete sense that those two sort of different edges of the art were kept separate from each other for survival of the tribe, for suppression of people who might have bad intentions or criminal intentions with the art.
Right.
I would rather, and I feel the same way. I feel like I oftentimes tell my students who are learning to become teachers that I'm not only responsible for my students, but I'm responsible for anybody that my students teach and anybody that those people teach. The responsibility is very far-reaching.
Right.
There's a saying in American Indian or Native American tribes that you're responsible for 7 generations. And I feel that's absolutely true. You can't. I mean, I could just as easily say, okay, we teach the teeth. Come in, we'll give you all. Then just hand it to anybody, gang members, anybody.
Right.
And I would feel absolutely devastated if I came to learn that one of those people went and used the art for the wrong reasons. So
yeah, I think there's a difference between exclusion and vetting. And you're right. We have a responsibility to vet who we teach. We're teaching them
absolutely
a deadly art. This is a really deadly art. All the arts that we teach have the ability to harm and worse. And we all know a 3-year-old can pick up a hammer and do just as much damage.
Yep.
But so can any psycho. So there's no need to teach them anything special.
Yep.
So, yeah, absolutely. So here's what I've heard of the arts, and I haven't dug too deep as far as the Filipinos go. It was a sword art at first, and then it went to the sticks and dance once the Spanish disarmed them. And then when it came back, it's kind of a mix now. It's still a blade art, but there are stick arts, etc. Some arts, from what I understand, maybe concentrate only on stick and never touch the knife. Is there any truth to any of that?
It's in a broad strokes, it's generally true.
Mm-hmm.
It's a much more complicated history than that.
Right.
The influence of European fencing has only recently been acknowledged and is starting to be more acknowledged in the Filipino martial arts. One of my teachers used to say that 60% of his particular system was European fencing. 60%. That's substantial.
It's huge.
And I would venture to say that most of the Filipino martial arts that are still viable for combat, some of them have devolved into just patty cake with sticks, but the ones that are still combatively viable, I think a good portion, if not 70-80% of them, come from European fencing, and you have to separate. And I'm sure you understand this. You have to separate modern sport fencing from European fencing with the broadswords, rapiers, etc. Very, very different. Yeah.
Absolutely. Nobody goes crashing into each other at 100 miles an hour. I'll just take the
hit. No, and or all the right-of-way rules that show up in some. It's just. I mean, there's a lot to be learned in modern fencing because anytime you isolate something and make it into a sport, just like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you're going to see innovations and advancements of certain aspects. And certainly that's happened in modern fencing. But they've lost the original core, which is don't die. Okay. And so you'll just have these people mindlessly running at each other and because there's no fear. And it's the same. It's really the same problem that arises in Filipino martial arts when you have everybody all padded up and they put padded sticks in their hands. It just turns into a bunch of childish silliness.
Yeah.
So
it turns
I'm adamantly against that kind of sparring. So
yeah, it turns into MMA every time. They just clinch and they go down on the ground.
Well, because they've essentially neutered their own weapon. So why use it when I can jump on you and then get to a choke or an armbar? Because that way I can at least have a very clean and decisive victory, whereas I can land a really hard padded stick shot on your glove and there's no effect.
Right.
So there's no payoff.
Yeah.
So
that's for sure. Have you always just studied FMA? I know you said you did a little bit with the Korean arts.
No, I've studied a lot of martial arts. I've always, how can I put this? First of all, because I lived with a military father, traveling was the norm. So endlessly traveling. So oftentimes you come to a new city or new town and whatever you had been previously studying was not available. So off I go on a new martial arts path. So many martial arts, a lot of Japanese martial arts. I did Hakaru Jiu-Jitsu for a long time. I've certainly done Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. I did Kenjutsu. I did Kyudo. I've done a lot of Chinese martial arts. I did Hung Gar Kung Fu, Chola Fut Kung Fu, Wing Chun Kung Fu, obviously Jun Fan Wing Chun Kung Fu. I did some. I trained Brazilian Jiu Jitsu here for a long time. It's a long. I did tons of martial arts. I studied straight up Western boxing. For me, the reason that I did Taekwondo for years, so you probably find pictures of me doing straight up side kicks and so forth. So for a long time, I was considered a kicker, and it's limited in its viability in real life. So, but when I started teaching Filipino martial arts, and I realized, and I know anybody who does Filipino martial arts will understand this. I can take any martial art, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, Shotokan, doesn't matter what it is. And I can, if I analogize it to being a liquid, I can easily pour it into the vat that is Filipino martial arts, and I can instantly assimilate it and apply it. But I can't go to a Shotokan school or a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school and pour Filipino martial arts and have them assimilate what I do.
Right.
So it, by virtue of its strategicness in the world and the fact that another, if I may say it, another motherfucker is coming over the horizon every other Tuesday to try to take over our islands, they had to be adaptive and be able to adjust. That became the fundamental center of their art, rather than saying we are a centerline punching art or we are a kicking art. Well, you don't know who's coming over the horizon tomorrow.
Right.
And when the Spanish show up, the conquistadors were basically the Green Berets of the Spanish military. Yeah. So you got a bunch of people who were probably in that time period around 4'6" to 4'8", maybe 5'2" is the center on the basketball team. Jeez. And you've got guys who are my size, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", getting off the ship with high level technology in their hands and an endless supply chain coming after them. So you have a very difficult problem, and you have to adapt. So going back to your statement about the way it has evolved,
yep.
Well, the conquistadors didn't come to every island. So they didn't really like going into the south. It was a little bit dangerous down there. So they went there a little bit less. And some of the inner islands, there's 7,641 islands in the Philippines.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's not a small archipelago. It's just gigantic. So they didn't get to every island, and even the islands they did get to, they oftentimes didn't get to the deep interior up into the mountains. So there are arts that come from those regions that have essentially been untainted by the Spanish influence. Okay. Hard to find them because, again, you've got, it's improving considerably, but you've got a third world nation. It's not a place where you're going to find a storefront Filipino martial arts school. Certainly not in the pre-war. Certainly not during the war at all. Certainly not immediately after the war. So you can't use the American kind of Western lens to look at this art. You have to look at it through their own history and their own culture. So there are certainly more Taekwondo schools in the Philippines than there are Filipino martial arts schools. So. And even there, if you talk to some of the Filipinos, they'll go, "Oh, well, the Filipino stuff, it's what my uncle did. We've all got a weapons of moral impact on my wall." So it has that sort of same feeling that people who live in Anaheim who never go to Disneyland, because it's right there. So, this other martial art comes in, whether it's Pencak Silat or Muay Thai or MMA, and they go, "Oh, that's interesting," and all the young people go flocking to it, whereas their uncle can kill everybody in the room, but they're not interested. You see what I mean? So it's a kind of a typical story, but because of the uniqueness, the geography of the Philippines, the uniqueness of the culture, the very different kind of respect for elders that they have than we have here, and also the negative side, which is the unending rivalries between the tribal factions, if you will.
Sure.
So they just can't get together. Yeah. And it's the biggest problem in my feeling in the Filipino martial arts is that we will have a Filipino cultural down here in Los Angeles, and we can't get the Filipino martial arts groups to come together to do demonstrations because they have such strong rivalries that they don't want to be in the same room as the other guy.
Oh, I see. So that's carried
ridiculous.
over. Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Yeah. I actually had a group I was in Kauai with my wife, and we were just on vacation, and there's some people there who come from a famous, I'm not going to mention the name, the famous martial arts teacher who has since passed away, but some of his family still lives there.
Okay.
And one of the family members actually came to me and said that they'd been talking. They saw me that I was on the island. They came and asked me if I would come and open a Filipino martial arts school in Kauai.
Wow.
And I immediately thought, well, that's crazy. I'm startled that you're asking a 6'3" haole to come over into a very strong Filipino community and open a Filipino martial arts school. And she said something that spoke to what I just said, which is that they didn't want their kids to be taught the rivalries. And
okay.
They said that you have such a reverence and respect for all of the Filipino martial arts and all of the different tribes, with no particular, I only like them or I only do this style. I don't look at it that way at all. I think the Kalinga headhunters have just as much to offer as the guys who live in the city and studied with this famous teacher or that famous teacher, because I know from my father's experience that the Japanese didn't really like being around the Kalinga headhunters. So
I wonder why.
So yeah, I wonder why. So it's different, though, of course, when you go into those factions and the people who are promoting Arnis, the people who are promoting this system of Eskrima, this idea of Kali, whatever it is, they're all fighting with each other, and it's just sad. It's really sad. First of all, it's something I say to my own students. Like, I have a couple of people who study with me who also have their own FMA schools, and they were initially thinking, "Oh, I'm never going to teach them because I'm competition for them." But I said, "I don't feel that way at all." Here's the reality: if a person comes in, we'll just create a generic person, and I teach a class, and let's say there's 5 teachers, and we're all going to teach one class after the other, so 5 different classes. Well, that one particular student that we're using as the exemplar may immediately connect to the way I teach, to the material I'm presenting, and to the group dynamic that has resulted from me teaching those people. Whereas they might go to the next person and be just as interested in the information being taught, but they just don't hear the teacher the same way, and the teacher doesn't quite reach them. That's just the reality of teaching martial arts. We can all think back when we were in grade school that we probably can't name every teacher we had, but we can name a few of them.
Yeah.
Those people had a huge impact, and that's the same thing. That I don't presume that because I live in this particular area, this is my territory, and all these students belong to me. No, I wouldn't be bothered if a guy opened a Filipino martial arts school a block away.
Yeah.
Because I'm not competing with him. The people who would look at it as if, well, he's cheaper, please go to him. Yeah. Because if that's how you're deciding the choices on the path of martial arts study, then that's where you should go and study. So, but come in, take a class, stay for a week, stay for a month, and if you're not inspired to stay and study for decades, then please leave. It's okay with me. I don't consider myself a coach. I don't consider people who walk in the door as prospects to be closed and sold memberships to. That's not the way I teach. I have students who've been studying with me for 25 years.
Wow.
So that's the focus. I want people who are going to be here who will be the people who carry this art forward. I'm not going to live forever, and I have a responsibility to my teachers and to the legacy that my father left me to pass this art on as best I can. So that's where my focus is. It's not on competing with the guy down the street who has a green belt. Right. And I'm not even in the conversation. I don't care. So,
yeah. Did your father take martial arts? I know he inspired you greatly.
He was a huge influence. First of all, let's try to simplify. He's a child of the Depression when the Depression came, his father abandoned the family. So he ended up being the man of the house. Obviously went off to war as a young man, fought in the war, had a very interesting career, 5 years in the Army, 25 years in the Air Force. And
Wow.
we traveled a lot. But because he had to basically become the man of the house and went off to war, really, he never went to college. So he became a very self-taught person. And that notion of self-teaching, I actually say to my students, I am the presenter of information and I create an environment of learning for you, but you're the teacher. You teach this art to yourself. You can just sit around in the corner and wait to be taught, and you'll be in that corner for 20 years and learn a little bit of stuff maybe, but you'll never really learn it. But if you come in like a thief with the full intention of stealing the art from me, that's how you'll learn it. That's the way I approach studying martial arts. I'm here to steal the art from that teacher. So I'm asking questions, I'm watching, I'm coming to every class I can come to. I'm relentless. So his approach to life was self-teaching. Teach yourself something. If you're interested in a subject, go and buy all the books. If you were in college, that's what they do. They just give you a book and make you read it. So go buy all the books and study them front to back, learn them front to back, and that's how you become an expert. He ended up being an expert in radar and all these things that you would normally have to have a college degree for, but he didn't have that. So he had learned during World War II, or prior to going to combat in World War II, he learned what they call the Shanghai method, which was the combatives that they taught to the U.S. Army back then.
Mm-hmm.
And after the war, after the war ended, he was still in the Army, had a couple of years left. He ended up as a drill instructor in boot camp, and he was a teacher of the Shanghai method in boot camp. So after a few years of doing Filipino martial arts, my wonderful, now long passed away, unfortunately, father took me out in the backyard and introduced me to the Shanghai method. That was amazing. It's just basically kill or be killed and how to use a knife in close combat. And it was, again, just like it was from the old Filipino guys I studied with. I was learning it not only from my dad, but from a guy who had done it in combat against Japanese soldiers. So There's something about somebody who's done it for real.
Yeah. Yeah, so your dad did a little bit of knife then through that method.
Absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
I still have all of his bayonets too, which is pretty fantastic.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
So yeah, he was super influential, and also he was influential in that whole self-teaching thing. He was really adamant about the difference. And I actually mentioned, I'm sure you read it in my website. I mentioned it in my website about how he made a big distinction in my youth between instructors and teachers.
Yes.
And he just asked me, when I expressed an interest in teaching, he just asked me if I was going to be an instructor, if I was going to be a teacher. And when you're a kid, those two words are side by side in the thesaurus. So you think, okay, well, what's the difference? And having been a drill instructor, he said, well, if you're instructing, you tell them what to do, and if they don't do it, you just yell it louder and have them do it again. And but a teacher, and as you read, a teacher goes behind the student and looks through his eyes at the problem, and in the process of teaching it to him, learns it himself anew each time he does. And to me, as a young man, that was magic. And that's how I've always approached teaching.
You know, it floored me when I read that on your website. I did read that. It floored me. But I think what floors me more is that you had the wherewithal to understand what he was saying at such a high level, to have it hit you like that.
I think that to understand it, you have to have had the context. Mm-hmm. My parents were both very adamant about us being very well educated, and I don't mean in smarter than some of the Joneses down the street, but we should be able to read. And my father would go by billboards and say, "Find the mistake." And my brothers and I would compete. Okay, where's the mistake? And that lent itself well, by the way, to technical illustration and design school, because I became like the guy you would bring your project to before you turned it in, because I would find all the mistakes. So that's just always been part of my family, is that, well, good enough is not good enough. I actually asked my new students, do you want me to approach teaching you by thinking, well, that's good enough? Or do you want me to constantly raise the bar for you? Because I can be very demanding and make you into something extraordinary, or I can just say, that's good enough. Which one do you want? And nobody ever says they want that's good enough. An analogy I use actually in my school is I'll use the idea of the jungle, the canopy in the jungle. You've got the ground layer, which is the novices. They just come in there. They can't even see the sky because the art is so overwhelming to them initially. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the initial ground cover. Those are the beginner students. They're starting to get their chops. Then you've got the lowest hanging leaves of the canopy. Those are they've got a few of their techniques down. They get in there, and then all the way up to the very top of the canopy. Those are the super advanced guys, or so they think. And then you've got the emergent layer, the trees that reach out of the canopy and reach higher. If you just look at a picture of the jungle, you'll actually see these emergent trees coming out. I always love the phrase the emergent layer, because those are the people who are going to go on and innovate and advance and expand the art. And those are the people who are going to become masters that are worth studying with. The people who are in the canopy, the top people and the bottom people, I consider those people, with no offense intended, those are the mediocrity. You can be at the top, you can be at the bottom, but you're just in the mediocrity. It's the emergent layer that are going to change the martial arts world. We can name those people. Bruce Lee comes to mind. Floro Villabrel comes to mind. John Lacoste comes to mind. Kakoi Kenyeti in the Filipino martial arts comes to mind. Aldo Nadi in fencing comes to mind. He's the emergent layer. We're talking about them 100 years after their death, you know. So the mediocrity, they don't get talked about.
Yeah.
This goes back to the teachers again.
Yeah.
The proliferation of the mediocrity is the fault of the teachers. Mm-hmm. I say whenever I go and teach seminars, I constantly bring up the notion of raise the bar. Why is this okay with you? Mm-hmm. Why is this level of understanding, this level of preciseness in your actions, why is this okay with you? You've decided that it's okay. Why? Once you pose the question to people, it's like the lights come on. They realize, oh, wait. I don't want to be that. I don't want to have basically acquiesced to kind of a middle of the road kind of, that's good enough. They actually want to. So that will frequently be enough to at least get them going. And now it takes one or two people who have the fire, as I call it, to keep that going. The fire is something that is harder and harder to find these days.
Right.
And I think because they've got their nose in their telephone and they're seeking dopamine hits from all these different sources. So they don't have a fire, so that their drive is actually inwardly found as opposed to outwardly found.
Right. Yeah. I love your senior student concept. And, I read about you on your website first, and I read about your senior student concept where you're not the teacher. You're a student. You just happen to be the top one.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is you don't just say it, you live it. Your videos really show that. You seem to have an excitement that does not seem to have waned at all over your entire life.
No, absolutely not.
Especially watching you with Burton or doing one of your classes. It's like, where does he get this energy? How can he still be so excited about it? Because you seem like it. You seem like someone who's been in it for only a year, and you're still talking about it, but you haven't been in it a year, No,
long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the fire that I mentioned. It comes from a couple of different things. I mean, when I was a boy, because my dad was in the military, he's working on base all the time. He said something to me and my brothers that was just it stayed with me forever. And it's something I actually say to new parents all the time. He came home one day and we were kind of expressing sadness and disappointment that we didn't get to see him because he was at work. And he said, well, your mom's job, and she's devoted herself to it, is to take care of you all day long, get you to school, make sure you get your homework done, feed you well, take care of your boo-boos, etc. He goes, I have to go to the office. I have duties on base. I'm a military man, and I have to follow orders, et cetera, et cetera. He says, so my job as your dad, because I cannot be there to do the things that your mom is doing for you, my job is to give you a wondrous childhood. So we will find adventures. We will expand your horizons. We will make adventures out of everything that we do, so that when you think back on your childhood, those adventures that you went on will inspire you to stay adventurous. So that's huge. I mean, we probably went to 200 or 300 castles in my childhood.
Wow.
And we wouldn't just go to the castle as tourists. My father would study the history of this castle, and he would walk us through, and he would be the tour guide, and he would tell us the names of the people who lived here and their stories. And he was just amazing at doing that. And it would never be BS. He would be accurate. He was, again, raised the bar. He was particularly intent on being accurate when he did that. So we did that in so many different ways. There's so many. I mean, I oftentimes ask my students, how many of you have built a tree house in your life? And nowadays, nobody's hand ever goes, I've probably built 50 tree houses in my life, because the point of being a child and a boy is to go out in the forest and explore and build forts and do all that stuff, you know? So that kind of a childhood, and having a father who was, he was very, very inspirational in that way. When we would move to a base, we'd have our little bedrooms on base housing, and he'd walk in and he'd go, okay, when we leave here, they're going to send in a crew of airmen, and they're going to repaint this whole room. He said, so I want you to do whatever you want in this room. You can draw on the walls, you can draw on the floor, you can paint everything. Go for it. So he would even say the same thing about coloring books. He goes, I remember this very well. He goes, you know, ordinary people color inside the lines. What an amazing thing to say. You know, my brothers and I were gifted from him with artistic talent, and for him to say, stop thinking like ordinary people, don't color inside the lines.
Right.
He'd say, color everything other than what you're supposed to color. Mm-hmm. Try that. You know, do it in reverse. Have it be like it's nighttime. Have all the shadows be strong, and explore these ideas. And it didn't matter what the result was. It mattered that that door was open to be free in creating things.
Wow.
And that's an astounding way to grow up. So I try to bring that into my teaching, into my school. I try to constantly ask people, are you simply doing it because I'm saying it? Or are you actually investigating it so that you can take ownership of it? Because you'll never be a teacher unless you own the art yourself. If you're just repeating, if you're relying on your ridiculous certificate on the wall that means nothing, you need to own this art. It needs to be your art. I don't teach you my art. I teach you to find your art.
Yeah.
That's art. If I'm teaching you my art, that's craft.
Yeah.
If you're doing it exactly the way I was doing it, you're doing a craft, not an art. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, certainly craftsmen are very respected, and they're unfortunately dwindling away, but to use an old-fashioned word again. But there's a very distinct difference between a craft and an art. And martial art it is an art form. There is a constant aspect of creativity to it. Although most people misapply that creativity, thinking that it's about aesthetics, like dance or something like that. It's not about that at all. It's about being able, just like you do when you drive. It's an analogy I use all the time. Being able to create the art in the instant that you need it, because you will not have access to memory. You don't drive from memory. You would crash within minutes. Mm-hmm. So you are literally creating the necessary alterations in your path and your speed as you experience the problems that arise. That's what martial art is supposed to be. And you can't get there by studying patterns and by repeating things exactly as they were taught to you. The only reason to do, let's call it precision or exactness in the beginning, is because one of my Filipino teachers said to me one time, we were working on a particular technique that was really rudimentary, but we spent hours doing it. Mm-hmm. And at one point, kind of without trying to be really impressive in the way he said it, just said it in a kind of a passing way. He said, I ask you to do this because you can't. When you can, we won't bother doing it anymore.
Interesting, yeah.
That's what the idea of precision is. Mm-hmm. Can you do it? If you can do it, then we can move on and take that capability into higher stratosphere. But if you can't do it, why are you asking questions about something that you have no business studying because you can't do the fundamental skills?
Right.
That's where precision really matters. Later on, the precision is going to be in fencing. There's this phrase that nobody ever says in fencing anymore, but it's an idea that it gets misunderstood, and that word is touche, which just means touch. What they're talking about is that in the old days, when you were doing what they call dry fencing, before it was electric, especially with an épée, which is as you probably know, is a much stiffer weapon than the foil or the saber. Mm-hmm. If you go out and you're just jabbing it into each other, you're going to give up fencing in about 10 minutes because it really sucks to have that thing slammed into your chest.
Right.
The guy who is an expert, a real master, is going to come at you at 150 miles an hour, and he's going to touch you on the chest because he has perfect control of his hand. But in fencing, we oftentimes just refer to it as having hand. He's going to have perfect control of the distance. He's completely in a relationship with you, and that relationship is the art of martial art, is being fully and completely able to express and to argue, essentially, in the midst of that terrifying experience and to come out on top. That's where the art lives. So to train with somebody in the Filipino martial arts, I can bring in a grandmother off the street, hand her a stick, and she can injure everybody in the class. Mm-hmm. We can just concede that point.
Right.
But the guys who can train at a very high level, I had a teacher who was in his 80s, and he would fire shots at me and just touch me on the cheek. And his stick was doing 80 miles an hour. And he would just touch me.
Wow.
That precision, that's what is the difference between the bottom of that mediocre layer and the top of that mediocre layer. The top, before they become the emergent layer, that's when that level of control happens. And when you can control to that level, and yet you're still using a hard stick, you're still unprotected. So what is protecting you is your skill. Now you can actually develop real skill. I'm not against armor, but armor encourages complacency. It's okay if you don't do it quite as well as you should, because the armor is going to protect you. So good enough is good enough. It goes right back down to that good enough is good enough problem. So it's not the way we want to train. So I actually recommend that people only do armor training perhaps 10% of the time. The rest of the time they should be essentially armor-free.
Right. And worried about what's coming at you.
And worried and respectful. Yeah. We start off the class with a salutation that basically says, I acknowledge the lethality of the weapon that I hold in my hand, and I promise to protect you.
Wow.
So because that's really the protection, is that guy on the other side, while he's focused on whatever it is he's learning, he's responsible for wherever the point of his weapon's going. So he can't just say, in fact, I actually, for a couple of reasons, I kind of outlaw the phrase, I'm sorry, in my class. You don't get to apologize. First of all, if you broke the promise and injured somebody, I'm sorry doesn't cut it. Second of all, I don't want you to practice saying I'm sorry after you hit somebody.
Right.
So the salutation that we would do, that's an apology before the fact. I acknowledge the fact that I'm imperfect, that I'm fallible. So if something happens, I apologize, but I'm not going to say I'm sorry at the time it happens. I'm going to make sure you're okay. If you need assistance, I'm going to provide that assistance, but we're grown men and women. We don't need to treat each other like little kids. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
No, this is a serious training. We're going to stay serious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just a minute ago, you were speaking about learning something, and once you learn it, moving on because you know it, and now you'll be able to apply it. Listening to you speak like that, it started to sound like that might have been the seed for your concept of mastering sombrado. where you have to break out of that box pattern and do it live. Is that similar to how you came up with that?
The box pattern was never part of Sombrata in the first place. That evolved out of seminar instruction.
Okay.
So patterns, as I say in my book, patterns naturally arise because we've got 2 arms and 2 legs, and there's only so many angles that you can throw, and things are bound to repeat themselves. There's nothing wrong with that happening.
Right.
Where it becomes a problem is when that ridiculous pattern is taught as Sombrata. And now all that happens is a repetitive doing of this nonsensical, mind-numbing pattern. That's not Sombrata. As soon as you're following a pattern, you're not responding, you're not solving, you're not creating, you're just doing a pattern. That's little kids in the backyard going with their hands clapping, and it's just useless. So unfortunately, pretty much every martial arts school I'm invited into to teach, everybody's doing the box pattern. It's like a cancer. So
how do you teach it? So the basic box pattern, the seminar box pattern, do you teach it as here's where we're going to start, but we're immediately going to leave it? Or do you have a different approach?
No, I don't teach the pattern at all.
Oh, I see.
I don't teach the pattern at all. No, I simplify it because the whole point of teaching is to get the idea across as rapidly as possible. Mm-hmm. I actually, years ago, I was invited to teach at a school, and they had, most schools will have 12 basic angles of attack. That comes from the religious connotation that the Spanish imposed upon the Filipinos.
Yep.
So the 12 is the Holy Trinity, 1 plus 2. So, so it's funny because you're actually following the enemy's religion. That's genius. So, but I digress. I actually walked into a school and had 128 basic angles of attack.
Wow.
The phrase itself is completely ludicrous.
Yeah.
Like I had a student years ago who said the first thing we need to do is kill off all the violent people. What a fantastically contradictory statement that is. So to have 128 basic angles of attack is ludicrous. How are you ever going to think of that as basic? So I just teach 4 angles to start with. I omit thrusting, and there's this very specific reason, because the way that people are taught to do thrusts is based on their ridiculous box pattern. So they add a portion of time to it so that they make the thrust able to be blocked in the way that they've been blocking everything else.
Okay.
So they're essentially committing suicide by practicing like that, because nobody on the planet is going to do a thrust like that. So thrusts come immediately off of the parry and go direct, so that the thrust as a riposte is almost instantaneous. So this is where yielding parries start to come into play. They don't come up as much when it's just impact attacks, as you either need to stop that shot or kind of get behind that shot and brush it aside. But yielding parries work much more effectively against thrusting attacks. So I omit thrusts in the beginning because of that alteration in time. It's not on a beginner level. So beginning, or what we call primero sombrata, the way that I teach it, does not have any thrust.
Okay.
I also focus exclusively on the northern hemisphere. So essentially from your hips or pelvis up. We don't throw attacks at the low line, because to attack the low line means you're bringing your head forward, you're altering the distance, and I can just hit you in the head before you can ever hit me in the leg. So why would I bother doing those parries? So that's, again, too advanced for primero sombrata. So we just omit the southern hemisphere. But from that point on, there are the crux of sombrata is the point relationship. Is my point up or down in relation to your point? And that doesn't mean that it's literally pointing toward the ceiling or pointing toward the floor. It means in relation to your weapon, is it up or down? That's a little bit more complicated, but easy to demonstrate.
Right.
Once you understand that that's the central core of how to do sombrata, you don't need any patterns. You can just follow the point relationship. So I start off with, okay, you've got a point up and point down parry for 1, 2, 3, and 4. So why would you do one over the other? What circumstance creates any of those? And now I can just begin to attack you at random. And because I've created the unique circumstance that calls for the type of parrying that happens in Sombrata, that is the only reason you're doing those kind of parries. If I was at, have you fenced? So I know whether you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have fenced a little bit. Yeah.
So if I'm at single tempo distance and I fire a number one attack at you, the classic inside sweep is going to get your face broken.
Yeah.
Because I have all of the time and trajectory to develop velocity. So now I'm going to be coming with a much heavier shot, and you would be an idiot to do an inside sweep against that.
Right.
And unfortunately, most schools who teach those kinds of parries don't teach any other kinds of parries. So those students will then go, well, let me try sparring, and they immediately find that none of their checks or none of the parries work. And because those parries are taught with an attending check, well, they abandon checking as well. So right away, they've lost the whole point. That's not what Sombrata is for. Sombrata is for if we put it into a combative situation, and I'm in the jungle. It's dark of the moon, and I'm fighting. I can only barely see anybody just by the starlight.
Right.
And the darkness under the canopy is ridiculous. So I'm going by whatever I can see, which is barely anything. And I've got my brother tribesmen with me, and we're fighting these other guys. Well, I might be taking out a guy, and I turn to the left, and there's a guy in range, and his shot is halfway to me. Uh-oh. Yeah. That's a big problem. That's what Sombrata is for. That exigent or emergency situation. How do I deal with that shot? Well, hopefully he didn't have a big power shot, because I'm going to have a hard time parrying it. I could do what we call a supported block, which I might actually opt for in that situation, simply to ensure that my parry functions. But from that point on, what I'm really after is controlling his hand. And I'm not exclusively a proponent of checking the hand. I actually am a big believer in checking the stick. The reason that we check the hand initially in Sombrata is because we're presuming that in that initial clash, we don't know whether that's a stick or a blade.
Right.
So we have to err on the side of caution, so we check the hand first. If I realize in the next few milliseconds that that's a stick, well, I'll definitely check on the stick. It's much more efficient and secure than a check on the hand. So, but the point of Sombrata is I would want, if I could, and this is why you train it,
yep.
When I check that hand, I'm going to seize control of that hand, and that is the end of you. You no longer have a weapon. I have essentially taken your weapon out of the game. I have disarmed you by simply removing your control from your weapon. I don't necessarily have to take your weapon out of your hand to disarm you.
Right.
So now the follow-up shots that I'm going to hit you with, all you have to block it with are your ulna and your bones of your hand and your face. So I'm going to chop you to pieces. But if I don't succeed in getting that hand, this is all happening explosively and at very high speed.
Right.
It bounces and things like that. Murphy is a motherfucker, so I'm going to miss that check. Okay, can I follow up and deal with the next attack? By virtue of the range, I'm not dealing with full power shots anymore. I'm dealing with a much tighter range, so the shots are going to be impeded by that range, so you're not going to be getting the heaviness that you would get at single tempo distance.
Okay.
So now the kinds of parries that were developed specifically for that we do in Sombrata, now they work very well. And they also provide me an opportunity at every exchange to seize that hand. My objective in Sombrata would always be to seize the hand and end the fight.
Right.
I do not want to have an exchange with anybody. Every click of the stick increases exponentially the likelihood that I'm going to get hit. And that stick goes so fast, and it's such, especially at that range, I can basically hit every target from your ankles to your head. Mm-hmm. So pro boxers are really good at blocking punches. Look at them at the end of a fight. They got hit a lot. Okay. And those punches, the fastest punches are going 30 miles an hour tops.
Yeah.
This stick is going 70 miles an hour. And Easy. It's thinner. It does way more damage. And it doesn't get hit, or it doesn't get hurt by being hit. So I can just keep pounding on your bones with it. I'm not going to hit soft tissue. I take great issue when I see people coming to me with big welts on their thighs and their shoulders. They're called double welts. It makes two stripes on you when you get hit with a stick. I'm saying, well, why are you aiming at soft tissue targets? That makes no sense.
Right.
Okay, that's why if you're gonna be truthful about sparring, put appropriate padding on, use an appropriately padded stick if you want to jack up the power, and aim at the targets that are going to do the damage you need to be done when you're really fighting. Because if you're just mindlessly flailing at somebody with a padded stick, what are you, 7? Okay, it's a child's game. This is a battlefield martial art. This is the realm of men. So let's act like men.
It's the playground again. I got you. No, you didn't. I got you, man.
Yeah. So I'm hiding behind the rock so your bullets can't hit me. It's a bush.
That's concealment, not cover.
I'm all for having fun,
Yeah.
There are a couple of things I just won't do in my school. People have asked, thankfully, none of my students would ask me this because they would know better. Mm-hmm. But I get asked all the time to bring lightsabers into the class.
Oh, jeez.
I'm like, A lightsaber is not a saber. Nope. B, if we're going to be ridiculous, why isn't it just infinitely long?
Yeah.
It's a lightsaber.
Yeah, it's a laser. Come on.
So I've always thought that was kind of silly. And that knowledge, by the way, and that kind of pick things apart quality that I have. I sat with my buddy Keith Cook in 1977. We were by ourselves in the middle of the afternoon, and we see that ship coming over our heads. I don't know if you're old enough, but there was no pre-advertising for Star Wars. So it was just, Star Wars, what's this? So we went in, we didn't know what it even was. We'd never seen an ad for it. So we walk in, and that, it's a spectacular beginning. But as soon as I saw the lightsabers, I'm like, no, that's not a saber. And then I said, why would you have the finite length? Why wouldn't you just have it be infinitely long?
Right. They've been trying to explain that one away for how long now? 50 years?
Yeah, so, I mean, I can set aside my disbelief and I can enjoy it, but don't ask me questions. Just don't ask it.
Yeah, I've seen every Star Wars first run in the theater. I was 9 or 10 when that one came out. And like most kids, it affected me pretty deep.
Of course.
I didn't get my love of blades from it, but here's a question. You're kind of known as the disarm guy, okay?
Yeah. And
we're working with sticks a lot, but it's also a blade art. And you said it earlier. Sure. We don't know if this is a stick or a blade. Let's say we're talking live blade. Are you going to do as many disarms than, let's say, it's a lead pipe? Or are you going to handle things differently? I know you said that you're trying to get control of that hand. Is that because it might be a blade?
Well, again, if I don't know what that weapon is, and we can presume, unless I'm in a situation where I'm standing in the room and I can see what the weapon is, if the altercation happens suddenly and it's dark, I have to presume the worst. So I'm going to immediately fault for it being a blade until I have absolutely ascertained that it's a bludgeoning type weapon. When you use the phrase "as many," there's almost an infinite number of possibilities with a stick, because I have the leveraging capability of the stick itself. I have different ways of trapping the weapon. There's so many things I can do to disarm the stick. The danger of the sharp edge of the blade changes that, and will not tremendously, but it does cut down the number of options. But again, we're talking about blades like the art was designed to be used. For example, when we say daga in the Philippines, we're talking about an 18-inch knife. We're not talking about a pocket knife.
Okay.
So when you're talking about a puñalada, like a pocket-style knife, like a 4-inch blade, by virtue of the fact that you've lost a tremendous amount of leverage, and the knife itself, the pommel or the hilt of the knife inside your hand acts as a supplemental skeleton to that hand. So now the muscles of your hand are clenched around a very rigid and immobile or inflexible skeleton. So your hand has actually become stronger by virtue of holding the knife. So very difficult to get the knife away from somebody who not only has very bad intent and is holding on to that knife as if it was their life, but against a trained person, you don't have a chance in hell.
Right.
You just and I've shown this to many people who talk to me about, I had one. When I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, one of the sons of the teacher, he was a grown kid, but he only did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I came to the class early, and I got my knife with me, and he says, "What's that?" And I said, "Guys, I teach knife fighting. It's a knife." And he just in this youthful arrogance, he said, "Well, if you pull a knife on me, I'll take you down and choke you out." And I said, I'll lay down and you can get in any position you want, and then we'll start. And he goes, okay. And his father goes, no. He said, Mark will kill you. The father grew up in Brazil. He knows what the knife can do.
Gotcha.
But the reality is, and I'm not, obviously, I wouldn't, I studied it. I have respect for it. I wouldn't denigrate any martial art. But oftentimes people overstep.
Yeah.
Like when you don't go to an acupuncturist to get your leg set. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
That would be them overstepping their capabilities. So this is an armed martial art that has a couple of thousand years of development. So when you're talking about a knife in a trained person's hands, the conquistadors themselves said, if you come upon a Filipino knife fighter and you are unarmed, there is nothing you can do.
Wow.
And these are the conquistadors. They're the Green Berets. Okay, these are serious warriors. So again, can you disarm the blade? If it's a longer blade, way easier. And I would certainly endeavor to take that weapon away from you, preferably to acquire it myself rather than just discard it.
Right.
I would always rather be armed than unarmed. No, only an idiot goes onto a battlefield without a weapon in his hand. Yep. So, but again, the focus is different because now I have to be very concerned about that edge. So I would probably be more intent on momentarily nullifying / negating your blade and removing your eyeballs from your skull.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So
fair enough. Well, I want to talk about the Filipinos, like you said, thousands of years, war, battle tested. We don't have that these days, but what we do have is a rise of knife violence. And we don't need to discuss why it's here. It's here. We have to deal with it. So what I've been asking all of my martial arts guests, for the layman out there who doesn't know anything and has zero interest in the martial arts, but does recognize that they might need to defend themselves and wants to take that responsibility, do you have any recommendations of what they could do at a minimum? I mean, they're not going to sign up for 20 years of FMA or Kali or Salat, but they want to get something under their belt. Do you have any recommendations?
It's a great question. Because there are, if you just extend your fingers, you could think of each of your fingers as a different way of looking at martial arts. You can have the camaraderie and the social interaction of martial arts. A lot of people are drawn to it from that. You can have the art as a way of self-development, sort of like in the old days we used to call it physical culture, when people would do gymnastics and things like that. Martial arts can kind of fit into that. You can have martial arts for cultural respect. I might be doing Kyudo, has pretty much no combative value at all, but the practice of doing it precisely can have a tremendous impact on your sense of self, which is certainly positive. A lot of do arts, Aikido, Judo, any art that ends in do, these are spiritual path arts that are designed to improve yourself. There's a great old saying about Kung Fu. When I was studying Kung Fu, one of the teachers said a great way to define what Kung Fu is, time spent on oneself, which is fantastic. And it's really not meant as a fighting art. Kung Fu is about developing yourself. So that aspect of the art, I encourage people to do that. And then let's set aside sport, because to me, martial sport is a contradiction in terms. So you have martial arts for warfare, which, if they are true martial arts, that was where they were born and what they were developed for.
Right.
And then you have martial arts for self-defense. Different realm, impeded by certain legalities and ethical concerns and so forth. Militarily, if I'm threatened by you, I'll just follow you around, figure out your daily movements, go up on a rooftop and take you out. Okay, that's martial arts. The contending with you and seeing who's better is a sport mentality. Why would I test my mettle? I don't care who's better. I only care who's left. So that's a martial mentality. So,
I like that one.
So in a self-defense realm, I obviously cannot do what I would do militarily, which would be to immediately arm myself with superior weaponry, and preferably superior numbers. We don't send back the extra airplanes when we overwhelm our enemies. Well, we want it to be fair. Let's send some planes and tanks back. No. Okay, the whole point is to have overwhelming superiority. So,
Right.
so again, you've got to separate it when you think in self-defense terms. So a couple of things. First of all, it can be very simple. They're not going to be investing time and effort into developing thousands of techniques, and they don't need to.
Right.
Really, it comes down to a couple of things. First of all, knowing when to act. That can sum that up in a really simple way. You need three things. You need the attack to be real. It can't be a 95-year-old grandmother. So the threat is real. The threat is imminent. It's not going to happen sometime in the next month. It's going to happen right this second. And you have no reasonable escape. So the threat is real. The threat is imminent. You have no reasonable escape.
Right.
If you're in your car, you can't get out of the car and have a fight and call that self-defense because you could have driven away. Okay, so if you go into a bar, you can't claim self-defense because you know it's a violent area and you're asking for it. If you engage, if the guy swears at you and calls you this, that, or the other, and you do the same thing back to him, you have engaged with him, you can no longer claim self-defense. So you've got to discipline yourself. Look at them as potential threats. Where are their hands? Ignore what they're saying. They're engaging in what we call the interview. It's not logical. When they say, "What the fuck are you looking at?" They don't really want to know where you're directing your gaze. It's not the point. They're trying to see if you're an opponent or a victim. So don't engage. Don't talk. Just watch them. Look at their hands. Preferably get distance, a lot of distance. Hard to beat track and field. Okay, so just leave.
Yeah.
Nothing they're saying is worth giving all of your wealth away to lawyers and spending any time in the cell. So now, if they're threatening a loved one or somebody who can't defend themselves, or you, and it's real and you can't escape, now it's different. So now you've got to be thinking of that horrible phrase, countervailing force. So force sufficient to stop the action against you. Stop is a really important word to remember. That's your objective. When you're teaching somebody to do a technique, whether it's how to hit center of mass with a 45 or how to use a knife, a fist, whatever, your objective is to stop the action against you. It's not to kill them. You don't want to say those words. First of all, you've been conditioned all your life. Your mom has told you 50,000 times, be a good boy, be a good boy. So you can't immediately replace that with I'm going to kill.
Right.
You'll hesitate. So you won't hesitate if your intention is to stop. So you want to really adamantly kind of carve that into your psyche that my intention is to stop this person. Now, let's talk about what we do to stop people. If it's called for, and I'm not going to do anything that's not called for. So if it's called for, I don't care what you say. But if you touch me or you make me feel like you're going to touch me, I don't need to wait for you to hit me. That's a fallacy that a lot of people fall victim to. I only need to feel that you're about to. Reasonable man doctrine, as they call it. So if I feel it's about to happen and I act, the basic rule of fist fighting is the guy who throws the first punch wins the fight. Okay, so if I feel threatened by this guy, don't wait for him to do something. His whole point in interviewing you is to build up the gumption to hit you. Interrupt him. All you have to do is feel threatened. If he steps into your space and you drop him. And I don't care about knocking him out. Again, the objective is not to knock him out. The objective is not even to hurt him. The objective is to stop him. Stop him. So you want to stop him. You want to hit targets that are going to stop him. Palm him in the nose. The likelihood is you're going to break your fist if you throw a fist. So hit him in the palms. Burton years ago said something brilliant. And I've given credit where credit's due. I don't know that he came up with it, but it was the first time I ever heard it was 1,000 years ago when he and I were talking. He said, if you're running down the sidewalk and you trip and fall, will you put your fists out? Genius. Because you won't.
No.
And I've even said to students, I'll say, okay, get on your knees and fall onto your fists. And they don't want to. I said, look, I'm actually taking away the power that you're going to hit with, and you still don't want to do it. And yet you're training to hit as hard as you can with your fist because you're hitting that pad. As soon as you hit that person's jaw or their fist, you're going to shatter your hand. So you got to change the way that you look at it. So open hand strikes are much more powerful and effective for self-defense. Again, the nose, fantastic. You're going to turn him into a sprinkler system. You won't be able to see. Trachea, hard to beat. Hitting somebody in the throat changes their whole afternoon.
Yeah.
A little bit more scientific here. What we call the baroreceptors in your neck. Baroreceptors are blood pressure sensors that tell your brain whether or not you're about to have a stroke. So if you smash somebody in the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the muscle that just goes alongside of your trachea, you smack them in that really hard with your forearm and the edge of your hand, you're going to spike their baroreceptors. Their brain's going to go, oh, we're having a stroke, and it'll shut down the whole system. And down they'll go.
Oh, wow.
So the old karate chop is essentially what you're doing, but you're hitting them as hard as you can into the muscular aspects of their neck.
Yeah.
Baroreceptors, very effective, high percentage technique. The heart and brain are very well protected. So with my bare hands, not a lot of ways I can get to them. Not going to worry about it. I can get to the brain through the supraorbital plates of your eyeballs, but all I'm going to do is alter your personality. It's going to take too long for that to actually have an effect. So I don't need to think in those terms. I can't really get to your heart with my hands. All the stupidity of ripping your heart out of your chest. Let's just drop.
Oh, come on! I saw it in Roadhouse. What are you talking about?
Just drop all that. So you start thinking, okay, where am I going to hit in the body? Well, bladder is pretty fantastic. It's basically a bag full of poison in a wood or a bone bowl. So if you ever did traditional martial arts and you ever ended or started a kata, you know that little two-fisted thing you do out in front of you?
Yep.
That's a little hidden piece of magic that the Japanese included in all their practices because it's a two-fisted punch in the bladder.
Ooh. I've seen boxers go down from liver shots.
Oh, yeah. That's why they say no hitting below the belt. It's really not about the testicles. It's about the bladder. That's why the belt that they wear goes all the way up over their bladder. They're covering their bladder.
Oh, yeah. Their protective one under their shorts.
Yeah. So the bladder is fantastic. Obviously, the groin is fantastic. And let me back up, though. Let's understand something. You're hitting somebody in the eyeballs, because I omitted the eyes. We can certainly poke the eyes. We can certainly hit the groin. But both of those targets, the eyeballs and the groin in particular, we are socially precluded from hitting those targets. Two guys who hate each other will wing punches in at each other for 20 minutes, and they'll never poke each other in the eyes. They won't hit each other in the groin. There's a social preclusion. The social contracts that we all follow all the time in the day omit that as a target that's acceptable. And the reality is, if you're going to, certainly for a 5-foot, 100-pound woman defending herself against somebody twice her size, the eyeballs are fantastic. But here's the rub. If you fail to hit them, you have told them to poke you in the eyes.
Ooh. Kind of like.
And if you fail to effectively hit the groin, you have basically said, "Kill me," because that's what will happen in the psychology of the man that you try to do it to.
Right.
So you got to land the shot. So don't flail at them and catch them with a little bit. You just told them to do it to you. So you got to really consider those things. So again, lesson learned. I just said that to however many 8 people hear this podcast. I'm just kidding.
It'll be about 7, I think.
But that doesn't. You don't need to go to a weekend seminar for that. Just lock that into your brain. Realize if you're going to poke somebody in the eyes, land the damn shot. Don't think of it as a 2-finger thing that you're going to poke in both eyes. Don't worry about that. Think of it like you're hitting a big button. Don't hit with the tips of your fingers. You'll break your fingers. Think of it like you're hitting a big button. You push that button. Aim all of your fingers into one eye socket.
Wow.
I have had the distinct displeasure of slamming my fingers into the back of an eye socket.
Ooh.
It's terrible. It's terrifying. Get a mouthful of vitreous humor. It comes squirting back at you. Vitreous humor is the liquid inside the eyeball.
Ooh.
And you are forever scarred by it, and now you have blinded somebody for life. So that's why it's better to leave.
Yeah.
All kinds of cool techniques you can do, but you're going to have to carry it with you forever. You're going to alter your humanity forever. So leave. Leaving is better. Don't be there in the first place, even better. Avoid those situations. If you carry a knife, I hate when people show me how fast they can open their stupid knife. I guarantee you, under stress, when your heart rate's over 200 and you get auditory exclusion and tunnel vision and your motor skills go down to zero, you're going to throw that knife across the parking lot. Yeah. And now you got nothing.
Yep.
So your awareness of circumstance and situation should have had that knife open in your hand long before you needed it. Mm-hmm. If you have to open it fast, you fucked up somewhere.
Yeah.
So
I'm a huge proponent of situational awareness. It's where
I mean, again, you do it when you drive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so well, hopefully.
Yes, and if you don't, you won't last long as a driver. So
no, I don't know how they do it with the texting these days. But,
well, they oftentimes don't, as you well know. I mean,
yeah,
and we can see them. It's a terrible thing, but the likelihood that either of us is going to be killed by some idiot who's texting is high, and it's a terrible thing.
Yeah, I've been a professional driver a few times, and I'm not big on texting. I'm older. My eyes can't see. I either have to choose to see the road or my phone, so it's the road. And I'll watch people. Their heads are down more than they're up.
Oh, yeah.
They could be taking a left-hand turn. As soon as they start that left-hand turn, it goes down into their phone. They're still in the middle of the turn. I don't get it. But
well, I think on a certain level, and certainly not consciously, I think on a certain level, they're it's sort of like with weaponry.
Right.
People are used to gauging distance based on empty hands. So when you put a weapon in their hand, all of a sudden they don't realize that you're standing in the range of my weapon, dude. Mm-hmm. So you need to change your understanding of distance. So the same thing is true when you're driving. People are unconsciously oriented to walking speed. So they think, well, I can glance down for a couple of seconds and look up. I'm not going to run into anything. They don't realize when they're driving, they just went over 100 yards in that little glance down. Yeah. And so it's insane. Yeah. It's not going to get better until it gets worse, unfortunately. So,
no. You also mentioned something I ask everyone: the tunnel vision, the freezing, the tachy psyche response, all that adrenaline. Is there a way, in the moment of it happening, for us to somehow get back to center so we don't have that? I mean, I know we can train it out.
No, yes, and mostly no. Mm-hmm. Because you're talking about a physiological response, so right. you can't alter that. Mm-hmm. So it's fear induced. This is the key, because exercise induced heart rate increases mildly simulate some aspects of it. You're tired, basically.
Yeah.
But you can't simulate the other hormonally induced effects, which is where the tunnel vision and the auditory exclusion, the vasoconstriction, all these other things are happening because of that. Essentially, a predator response. You're being chased by a smilodon or a saber-toothed tiger. If it bites off your arm, you're not going to bleed out because of vasoconstriction. Okay, so it gives you a moment to survive, so you can do something about that arm that's been bitten off. If you can't get your arm out of its mouth, looping is a good thing. Looping is another aspect that comes up with this heart rate increase. Looping, I pick up the rock and I keep hitting the damn tiger in the head until it lets go. Loop, loop, loop. That's great. Works great for the survival of the species. But when you move it into the modern times, the number of times people have dialed 411 instead of 911 and done it over and over and over again.
Oh.
Because they're looping.
Mm-hmm.
Or the officer who has a new firearm that has a slightly different type of safety on it, not ergonomic, let's say. And he just keeps trying as hard as he can until he rips the tendon out of his own finger trying to pull the trigger because he cannot solve the problem of the safety because he is in that state where he can't think.
Right.
So that there's one example of a way that we could change that, which is we'd want to minimize anything that would be difficult to figure out at any level. So the fancy opening of the knife, the twirling and the spinning and the I ask people all the time when they emphasize how cool the karambit is. As soon as you put cool in front of it, I'm a proponent against it. I ask them, how many times have you cut meat or bread with a reverse grip on your knife? And nobody says ever. Nobody does that. I said,
I'm going to go do that right now.
Yeah, so the likelihood that you're just going to plunge the knife into your own femoral artery while you're trying to do your cool techniques with your motor skills being reduced to almost zero is really high. So use the knife in the way that you would normally use the knife, and that way you're likely to still have your digits and your blood in your body at the end of the altercation.
Right.
So again, we have to realize that there is going to be, no matter what we do in our training, a physiological response. Can it be altered by training? Yes. But I would venture to say 99% of the people out there would not be willing to do the kind of training that would alter it. You've got to start thinking about Navy SEAL training and Delta Force training, the kind of stuff they go through for months, and the deprivation and the coal and everything else. They're trying to teach themselves how to deal with the worst adversity possible, get comfortable with the suck. If you're not willing to do that on any level, then stop fantasizing that you're going to be able to do these cool techniques. What you want to do is survive. You want to go home to your wife or girlfriend or husband or boyfriend or whatever is happening here. If you could take 10 steps back and look at it, would you really want to invest your life and your wealth in what you're about to do?
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah. With the concept of stress inoculation, it sounds like that's what the SEALs do, etc.
Yeah, but again, stress inoculation in civilian training, it's fun to say, oh, we did the stress inoculation drill. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're not on the ground trembling and shaking and altered, you didn't do anything. Because it has to be actual stress, not just, oh, it kind of was exciting. No, you missed it. Okay,
well,
so
what about the constant training of having fists in your face or getting used to the sticks coming out at you at 80 miles an hour?
That's good. You know? That's good. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
A bit of confidence.
Although, just last night when I was teaching, and I'm adamant about this all the time, people fall into the habit of unconsciously cooperating with each other.
Yes.
And the key there is they're unconscious of it. So they start altering the path of their attack to make it easier for their partner to parry the attack so their partner succeeds, because we're social beings. We want our partners we want to lift each other up. Oh, you did great. That was a great practice. But then they do it with me and none of their parries work because I'm actually aiming at them.
Right.
And they're so used to blocking a shot that's going to some arbitrary space in the air that they put their parry where it shouldn't be and they get hit on the hand. And then, of course, because their vision is narrowed, they say, I'm hitting them on the hand. No, I'm aiming at you, and you're putting your hand in the path of my weapon because you're parrying a shot that's never going to be thrown at you. So your training has actually made you worse.
Got you.
That's the huge part, because you're either going to get better by training or you're going to get worse. There's no neutral. Okay. Yeah. So you have to do it correctly. So I rail on this. When people talk about training, we talk about training skill, fighting skill, training skill. Oftentimes people will say, oh, training skill, I know this drill, I know this exercise, I know this. But are you actually doing the exercise with the intent in mind and doing it in such a way that you will accomplish the intent? Because more than likely you're not. So, for example, the box pattern nonsense. They don't even know what the intent is, and all they're doing is becoming good at the box pattern. Right. That's like becoming good at bicep curls. Who cares? Okay, there's an objective to bicep curls, and if that's not happening, if you're not altering your diet, making sure you're resting sufficiently, blah 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 blah, everybody knows all the bullet points you have to hit, then don't waste your time doing bicep curls. So the same thing goes for training. If your partner is not aiming at you, if you are not in range to be hit, then everything else is moot. That's it. You have to actually make the drill real. And then the way you're going to keep each other safe is to be present and to protect one another.
And that's
real training. It's not just stupid patterned exercises and click, click, click. And I walked into a swimmer school years ago and they said, we teach over 300 Senawali patterns.
Wow.
And I turned to my partner and said, that's because they don't have anything else to teach. Because I could come up with 3,000 or 30,000 or 300. There's infinite numbers. It's like drumming. I can just keep coming up with different patterns. Who cares? Right. First of all, those patterns will never come up combatively. Never. It doesn't. You don't do that when you fight. It's worthless. So it sure is fun, though. And again, there's that one finger of the hand that says, okay, I'm going to go and have fun. That's in Tablato. That's great. You can enjoy that. You can learn. And there are things in it that are okay. The what we call Amara, which just means exercise. The Sinawali Amara, the exercise of doing double stick patterns. What are you learning? Well, you're trying to make your left hand, if you're right-handed, essentially as skilled at your right-handed doing certain angles and so forth. That's positive. You're trying to increase the speed past your normal comfort level so that you have to make corrections at speed. That's positive. You're adjusting for range, although the range is inaccurate because you're creating a false distance because you're not in range to hit each other. So all the time spent being in a range where you can't hit each other, kind of a waste of time. So, but again, if we're focusing on angles and precision in landing shots and all that, that's fine. But what value does 300 or 30,000 different patterns of doing that have?
Right.
Zero. Okay, so we've got to keep the original. There's a great saying. I've been doing martial arts all my life, so I have a zillion sayings in my head. And one that comes to mind is great. With one eye on the mountaintop, keep the other eye firmly affixed to the trail. Okay, so you have to know what the objective is, and you have to now know, is this path I'm on leading to that objective? Because if it's not, A, should I be doing it at all? And if I think I should be doing it, can I correct it so that it gets me to my objective?
Right.
Just because somebody taught it to you, by the way, doesn't mean they did it correctly.
Fair.
So use your critical thinking skills. If your teacher poo-poos you from doing that and suggests you don't, well, you should find a different teacher. Okay, so if anybody asks you to disengage your critical thinking, run.
Right.
Okay, you are your own teacher. So engage your critical thinking skills. Look at this drill. Are these parries actually working? Could I actually stop a real shot? And don't be a testosterone-driven idiot and say, well, just hit me with a real shot and let's find out. That's not going to pay off in the long run. Yeah. You can armor up and but again, every time you change the parameters, the skill changes a little bit. Mm-hmm. They're not hitting you, they're hitting the armor. That's maybe an inch or two away from you. You're changing the target. So again, it's good to do armor stuff, but just realize it is changing the parameters. So, but again, it's just keep applying your critical thinking skills. Do I have the distance? Am I actually aiming? And could I, if I wanted to, simply pull the trigger and really land a shot? In other words, I have the distance. I can not only hit the target, but I can penetrate through the target. Can I develop, and am I training to develop as much velocity, mass times velocity equals force? Mm-hmm. If I'm not working on hitting with real speed, I oftentimes just refer to it as driving nails. If you're not driving nails into your partner's head, what the hell are you doing? And oftentimes there's this weird thing that's happened in FMA where people are doing what amounts to pushing their sticks toward each other. It drives me out of my mind. When you do it with me, you're going to feel like, holy crap, if I don't parry, he's going to smash me in the face. Yeah. I want you to feel that fear, even though if you did nothing, you wouldn't get hit because I'm going to control all the hits. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to make you feel like I'm not going to control the hits because I want you to have that sort of little piece of fear, that little piece of stress, so that you learn to function in that place. And yet you know that if you make a mistake, you're not going to pay. I'm going to protect you.
Right.
I had an old Filipino teacher who used to intentionally push his face out into the range of the hit to see if you had any control.
Really?
He's like 87 years old.
Wow.
Imagine how you'd feel if you smashed him in the face with your stick.
Right.
So he would just do it at random. He'd just shove his face out. Oh, okay, you have good control. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I hope nobody ever made a mistake.
But again, that's kind of the old school because
you
walk away from that going, gee, the first level is, God, I'm glad I didn't hit him. And then the next couple of hours, you're traumatized. Like, what if I had hit him? Oh, my God. That is so valuable as a teaching tool for yourself. Again, you're teaching yourself. So if you're not having those epiphanous moments where something is altering the path of what you're doing, you're not really training.
Right.
You need to seek those moments out because that's what changes you as a martial artist and makes you better. So
yeah. Wow. In your video, you spoke to Burton about exigent circumstances and creating them. Do you have any tips on that? I loved the concept. I heard you say it, and then you spoke about the classic error in FMA, and I saw it as soon as you did it. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's not like using true times in fencing, right?
Yeah. So, well, it's like taking a step before you make threat and lunge.
Right.
You're just committing suicide.
Yeah.
So it's easy. Anybody who's done a point weapon in fencing understands that right away. But in the FMA world, even though they're literally doing an art called fencing, eskrima, it means fencing. So, but very few of them, as you probably have experienced, very few of them understand distance at all.
Right.
The notion of distance as time is completely lost on them. The concept of having line is completely lost. When you say line, they immediately go back to like center line theory, like we're doing Wing Chun. And no, that's not what I mean by line.
Right.
So exigent circumstances, actually, that's one of the first ones. I mean, to really, really simplify it, any form of fencing, whether I'm using a katana, a rapier, or a stick, fencing is fencing. Principle is principle. So I'm essentially fighting for two things. I'm fighting for distance. I'm fighting for line. If I have both of those at the same time, you're dead. So that's essentially what a fencing match is. I've said to people, when you're watching an old swashbuckler movie and you see the guys go back and forth, ching, 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 with their sword, especially back then, they were probably trained by this wonderful teacher hero who I got to meet and work with a little bit. He's long since passed away. His name was Faulkner. They had a school over here on Hollywood Boulevard that was just a magical place. The front of it just looked like a shithole. Just horrible. But you walk inside and it's all wood and beautiful. And in his office was nothing but Filipino blades, by the way. It was just magnificent. And,
really?
But he taught all of those guys, Errol Flynn and all those guys. And he was very adamant about the sword play being as realistic as it could possibly be. And I said to people, when you're watching those sword fights, as much as they're doing it for a cinematic impact and they're adding drama to it, they're fighting for distance and line. Once they have the distance and they have line, you can't stop their thrust. So it's as simple as that. So the same thing is true with a stick. If I have line and you don't understand what line is, you're done.
Right. So,
and if I understand line, even if you take line, I can take line back because I know what line is. If you don't know what it is, you won't know that you have an advantage. So again, the fact that Filipino martial arts people don't really even know what that is, and hopefully they'll go out and find a book on European fencing and learn about line, because they should, but it's absent from that. So that's an immediate exigent situation. If I've moved in on you and I've taken line, you're in a world of hurt and you need to change the situation. That's an instantaneous exigent situation. Gotcha. But I think you're talking more about like self-defense scenario kind of training. I'll ask, is that what you're
Well, I was just speaking about it in general as a concept. One of the things I do want to do with my show is hopefully people who don't train will hear it, have something inspire them, and maybe do something like go to that seminar instead of learning how to paint and drink. So, in creating the exigent circumstances, I think you explained it to Burton, is I've only given you two choices now. That's the exigent situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Get hit or parry here.
Right.
I've forced. I actually say in my class all the time, if I can get you to defend yourself, you're dead.
Right.
Okay. So, because now I'll just take your weapon from you, and that'll be the end of it. So it brings up a thought in answer to your question, which is that a lot of training, certainly in the Filipino martial arts, but also in the real world, like kickboxing, etc. People are essentially training for what we in the sword arts would call dueling.
Right.
They're out of range. They have to get into range. So you'll see videos out there, for example, on non-telegraphic attacks. Mm-hmm. Well, non-telegraphic attacks are great. I practice them all the time. It's a good thing. But if I'm close to you and I have a weapon and you have a weapon, a non-telegraphic attack is not necessarily such a good thing. Because if you're doing one and I'm doing one, we might just take each other out at the same moment.
Okay.
So it might make a lot more sense to do a very pronounced threatening attack so that your self-preservation brain kicks in and you immediately put all your forces into defense. Thank you, you're dead.
Right. Kind of like a feint, right?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't even have to be a fake. I can just go ahead and try to bash you. As soon as you parry, I'll take your weapon from you, and that's the end.
Oh, wow.
So but I forced you because your brain's not going to go, yeah, we'll just take a shot. No.
Right.
You're not going to do that. Your brain is going to say, protect me. Mm-hmm. So that's an exigent circumstance, and that's a much more likely scenario. If you think about the average room in your house, unless you're crazy rich, if you have furniture along the walls, probably the space in the middle is maybe 12 feet, 7 feet across, something like that. It's not huge. So if you're in a fight, are you really going to be dueling? You're already in range.
Yeah.
If you're in a bar fight, you're not going to step back out of range and work on closing the distance. It's that you're already in the fight. The fight happens. If you're in a riot, you're not basically bouting with somebody. There's nothing wrong with training that way, but we have to know what the mountaintop is and keep our eye firmly affixed to the trail. So if the mountaintop is that you want to be bouting, well, you're a sport martial artist, that's fine. Stick with that.
Right.
But if you're trying to do this art for what it was originally designed for, which was warfare, then you need to not only be able to deal with an enemy that is closing, but more likely a weapon or an enemy that is already here. We have to deal with them now, in this instant. So the exigency, the emergency, is that we don't have the advantage of time. Time gives us, or distance gives us the time to think and to decide and look for avenues of escape. But when he's already in range, that's all gone. I say to people all the time, there's thousands of defenses against a punch up to the point where it impacts your face. Okay, so if I'm already there, all your cool techniques mean nothing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's funny because I've had relatively out from the outside world, they were considered high level people in the Filipino martial arts.
Okay.
I wouldn't consider them high level, but outside, they've got their certificates and they've got all that stuff.
Right.
They'll come into my school, and in a not mean way, I want to know where they stand. Let me see what your art is like. I don't really, your certificate means nothing to me. I'm going to touch hands with you, or I'm going to have the students touch hands with you, and we're going to see where you are so I can see what I can teach you. So oftentimes we'll just put a mask on them. This student's going to come. We're going to start at single tempo distance, and we're going to bridge the gap, and we're going to hit you with a prescribed attack. I'm going to hit you with a number one attack. That's it. I'm not going to try to fake you out. I'm not going to try to trick you. I'm simply going to close the distance and hit you with a number one, and you're going to parry it. I don't care what you followed up with. I don't even want you to worry about reposting. I just want you to parry. And for the next 3 minutes, they get hit over and over and over, and they never succeed at parrying a single shot. If they do make a connection or an engagement, as you and I would call it as fencers, there's no strength behind it, and the hit lands anyway.
Yeah.
So, and I'll say, okay, how many years? 15 years of Filipino martial arts, and the basic attack is a number one. Every system of numbering in the Filipino martial arts, the number one is always basically a forehand attack because it's the most common attack.
Right.
So, hence number one. So, you're unable to parry a number one attack. And I'm not even doing it at range. I'm giving you the advantage of a single tempo distance. You can see him coming. Mm-hmm. So you have time to generate or prepare, do a preparation to generate force, and you're still failing. What use has your training done?
Wow. Yeah.
And because they can look around and see people who have been training far less in time than they have, mm-hmm. who are effectively parrying those shots. Thankfully, more often than not, it is not a negative experience. It's a awakening. They actually realize, oh crap, I've been on a road, but I haven't been on the right road. And I'll say to them, the skills you have are not useless. They're just misapplied. You're using a needle nose plier to hammer nails. You're using a hammer to open a pipe wrench. You're using the tools wrong.
Right.
I can show you how to use the tools. I oftentimes say, and I'd rather have the guy who has his grandfather's tools in an old rusty toolbox that are all, the feeling of a tool like that. It's been used so much that it's just like feels fantastic in your hand.
Yep.
And that guy, he has 9 tools. And when you're driving into his driveway, just by the sound, he already knows what the problem is. And he opens the hood and he fixes it. I'd much rather have that guy than the guy with the giant toolbox with all the fancy tools and all the bells and whistles, but he has no idea what the hell's wrong with your car. Okay, so that's what we want to become as martial artists. We want to become that guy who can pick up those weapons that were taught to us by 1,000 generations of warriors. I mean, basically, the real techniques that come to us are the techniques that survive the battlefield. The techniques that don't make it to us didn't. So we're holding in our hands a treasure trove of technology from thousands of warriors proving them in battle.
Yeah.
So it behooves us, especially if we consider ourselves teachers or ambassadors of the art, to acquire at least some semblance of the same skill and application so that we can pass that knowledge on.
Right.
If you can't parry a basic number one attack, maybe you should reconsider your profession. Okay. So, or reapply yourself, reignite your fire, find somebody like myself or teachers that I can recommend who will give you back the teeth of the art that you thought that you knew.
Right. Do you get a lot of people that come in from other schools?
Yes and no.
Okay.
It takes a particular kind of student to do that. Usually they're either at their wit's end and fed up, and they basically just don't care anymore about maintaining a positive connection with their old kind of clique or circle.
Yeah.
Because those people might not think too highly of them going, it's just because it goes back to the stupidity of the rivalry stuff. It has nothing to do with it being me. It just has to do with them studying with anybody else. Or it's somebody who has never been really sort of like myself. I don't know why, because my brothers certainly were, but I have never been vulnerable to peer pressure. I just basically just don't give a shit what other people think. And I've always been my own person, very iconoclastic. I'm always questioning everything. Just because somebody with a lot of fame or lots of certificates said it, I don't necessarily believe it. I'm still going to test it. I'm still going to find out for myself if it works. I don't know why I'm like that, but I've always been like that.
Right.
I'll be respectful, and I've obviously been able to study with many people, so I don't just walk in and say, "Okay, what's this crap you're teaching?" I know how to, it's like I know how to ask a woman out. I don't just walk up and grab her and drag her away. And the same thing goes with studying. There's a certain way to approach teachers. Certainly with the old Filipinos, you don't approach them like it's a business. You have to gain their trust and their respect, and you do so by being genuine and being real. They're not going to fall for a facade, so you have to actually be what you purport to be.
Right.
So I've also found, by the way, on a side note, I've actually come to learn from somebody who actually sought me out, because thankfully my reputation as being somebody who actually was what he purported to be preceded me, and they actually sought me out, which was... There's pretty much nothing more gratifying and complimentary than that.
Right.
For example, when I taught Joe Hyams for years, I taught Joe for 20 years. Joe wrote the Zen and the Martial Arts, and he was a private student of Bruce Lee and Bong Soo-han and Maso Yama and all these other people.
Wow.
And he called me and sought me out as a teacher, and I was 26 at the time. And I go to his house, and it's the same house and driveway where Bruce Lee had taught him 15 or so years earlier. And so I go in the backyard, and there's a guy sitting there in the lawn chair, and he's there with Joe to watch me kind of show them my art. And that person is Sterling Silliphant.
Wow.
I don't know if you know who that is, but...
I do.
Yeah, so yep. Joe and Sterling shared their lessons with Bruce Lee when they studied with Bruce Lee. So they wanted to see if I could teach them. So I gave them a little demonstration. My brother came and helped me, and they both went on to study with me for years, both until each one passed away. Sterling passed away much earlier than Joe, but they both studied with me until they died. So Joe for little over 20 years.
Wow.
So, but I discarded belts, and I have one certificate that I kept that I keep only because the teacher who gave it to me showed himself to have no honor or class, so it's hanging in the bathroom in my school. So
fair enough.
And I told him so, and I posted a picture of it. So I wanted him to know. So there's that iconoclast in me. I just can't put up with that kind of stuff. So, but when push all those silly trinkets away, all the certificates and rank belts and all that,
Mm-hmm.
the things that matter to me were those teachers who sought me out, and when somebody of Joe Hyam's caliber sought me out and stayed with me for 20 years.
Wow.
That means a lot more to me than a belt does.
Wow. 26 years old and he sought you out. That's
yeah,
amazing.
It was pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
It was pretty fantastic.
You mentioned your brothers again. Do they train as well?
Well, my brother John trained with me for a time. He's passed away, killed himself years ago, 20 years ago.
Sorry about that.
My other brother never did. He kind of went off on his own life and never did. My sister never did. So it's pretty. I was all consumed by martial arts as a kid. So they just kind of went, okay, just let me go. So it was a very interesting era to come up in martial arts wise. I grew up in the midst of the Kung Fu craze. So if people aren't old enough to remember that, it's kind of difficult to explain to them how extraordinary it was. If they think that MMA is popular now or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is popular, they have no idea. It was so much more popular than that in the Kung Fu craze. So it changed the world. There were I can explain it in the simplest way that in 1971, an average little town might have one little martial arts school. Usually it'll be in like a YMCA or a church basement or a garage. By 1975, that same town would have 100 martial arts schools.
Wow!
Because of the Kung Fu craze.
Wow, so that's amazing. I just want to take a moment because we mentioned it. Just want to let anyone know out there that is contemplating suicide or think that there's nowhere they can turn. There are places you can turn. There are people who care.
Thank you for that.
You can call 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. 988. Do reach out. There are people that will listen. Okay. So yeah.
You can also reach out to me.
Okay. Yeah.
I would be more than happy.
Yeah.
So
you can find Mark Mikita at fightology.com. And his contact information is on there. That's how I got a hold of him. I just kind of picked up the phone and said, hey.
Yep.
And he's like, what do you want? Who are you? Get out of here.
Stop calling me.
Yeah.
It's like the 15th time. Leave me alone. Keep changing my number.
Oh, man. I just keep changing the number. Yeah. But no, seriously. Mark's a serious man. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I would go all night. I think I need to keep listeners their time in a little bit of check. Having said that, I would love to have another conversation with you at another time. I don't think we're even close to being done. Looking at some of my notes, I know we're not.
I'd be delighted. That'd be fun.
We've covered a lot of ground. Do you do seminars?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you have any coming up? This will probably... What are we looking at? Another 3 weeks. So we're looking at mid-March.
I don't have anything coming up right now.
Okay.
I'm certainly open if somebody would like to host me.
Okay.
And that's both nationally and internationally.
Mm-hmm.
What I am about to embark on probably in the next month or so is I'm going to start I don't really like the phrase, but I'll use it because everybody will understand what I mean by it. I'm going to launch an online academy.
Okay.
I have my Mastering Sombrada video courses out there, and I'm going to probably take that course from the platform that it's currently on and apply it to a new platform and build the online academy, not around it, but it will be available there as opposed to the old platform, and then I'll expand upon it even more. I'm going to be going into a lot more of the Kamaline skills as well, which is the apex exercise.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I really wanted to get deeper into the Kamalayan, but that'll have to be on the next one. So
Absolutely.
We know we have fightology.com. Do you have any other websites? Do you have a day job?
You can just go to my Instagram, which is just at Mark Mikita, and same thing for my what the hell is it called? Facebook. It's just Mark Mikita. Just
Facebook.
look me up. Yeah. So I don't have anything else. Anything else that I do have, the online academy will all be available through fightology.com.
Instagram. I'm gonna find these links.
I've never done TikTok. People suggest I do. I was waiting for it to not be a communist Chinese venture. So I don't know what the status of that is right now. I haven't really looked into it, but I'll consider it. So
yeah, as a photographer, I opened up a one of those. I don't know if it was Instagram or whatever, and I let it go and forgot about it for about a month, and it got hacked. And
yeah,
I'm not even going to sit here and describe what was on my wall, so I just kind of walked away from it.
Yeah, I've been hacked a couple of times. It's not fun.
No, not at all.
I wish they'd just come to my school.
All right,
just come to my school.
For sure. All right. Well, Mark, if you can hold on for me, we'll talk a little bit here. I'm just going to say goodbye to the people. Everyone, you've been listening to By the Blade with Rich Fern and my very special guest, Guro Mark Mikita. I hope you check out his website and learn more about this fantastic martial artist. We'll see you next week. If you or somebody you know is contemplating suicide, please reach out to the Suicide and Crisis Hotline 988. There are people there that will listen to you. There are people there that will care. Please call 988.
This has been a Spiral Studios production.